I remember
So I had my little
when we were
mention
doing
plan.
the bells and they would have it like south. You'd get to like the bells and they go south.
He probably
And then
was.
people still have
That's true. He met her like halfway up.
But it was.
Sorry, this is just.
I forgot about that.
He's like,
Although I think that's.
I think so. I think some of them.
All right, it is 5 o'clock. I'm gonna go ahead and start the meeting. Wednesday, October 11th, 2023, the Osceola School Board of Education. School District. 5 o'clock committee meeting. Start with a roll call. Kaisa.
Here.
Jan.
Here.
Corey. Craig. Myself is here. Item 2 is elementary facilities planning. We have a few guests.
We do, we'll dive right in. So April's working on one of the plans. But just as a refresher, we met about a month ago and went through options A through G or something to that effect, and that they used to be 1 through 5, and now they're down to 1 through 3.
When you were trying to narrow
So,
it down and then
you guys did great. You guys did a really good job. So we are looking at 3 options this evening, and so we can pass those out, and then April will pull those up on the screen. The reality is these should look quite familiar to you. So we're gonna I'll briefly go through the site plan and the floor plan just as a refresher for everybody. And then I'll hand it to Megan to talk through the preliminary budgets for each of the 3 options. And then Debbie from RW Baird is joining us tonight to then connect tax impacts to those budgets. So those are the 3 main objectives for tonight. You do have the plans in front of you, so option 1, so we've kind of switched options again, but option 1 is the new elementary school. So that should look pretty familiar. We haven't done any more analysis on 1 story versus 2 stories. Should it be 2, should it be 1? But this is still budgeted based on the space program, which we created going into the last community survey, reviewed with the board a number of times, have reviewed with the leadership team a couple of times. So feeling pretty good about that one. You can see that we have included and excluded daycare on all of them. So this, I'll put the small white box on the site plan on the right side, and then on the second page of your handout, the rooms labeled DC would be where those 8 daycare rooms would go if you consider going that route. So again, pause me if you have questions on these. I'm just going to move quickly because that should look pretty familiar. That's basically the option we reviewed a couple of times already, but really went into more detail on last time. The next page should be the option where we stay at the current site. So this would be the existing elementary school with the major addition and renovation. And you can see here that the western wing, or the area in pink or burgundy on your plan, site plan, would be the daycare in this scenario. So we haven't shown a site plan that takes that piece away, because in reality it's just more green space, right, more playground. So we did want to give you kind of the worst case scenario, and I don't mean that to steer your direction, but the worst case in terms of available site area would be if we keep that piece of the school and turn that into daycare. You will see it's probably more rooms than we had shown on the other plans, and the main reason there was really didn't make a lot of sense to tear off just a tiny piece of that existing building. Why not just keep it all? Whether it's daycare, whether it's school, whether it's storage, doesn't matter. So that's a bit of an anomaly, but it just makes sense given the square footage that's available there. So option 2, as we're talking tonight, is existing elementary school. You can see site plan and floor plan with daycare identified on the west side, or through renovation of the one of the older sections of the school. And then the final option is option 3, which we talked through as a group in quite a bit of detail last time we were here, 2 times ago, sorry. Not when we went through the postcards. But that would be the option where we would move 5th grade to the middle school, and we would expand the intermediate school. So we did have options for you last time. If you remember correctly, we had conceptualized a plan that actually just went to the north up towards the playground. We explored that along with a variety of other scenarios. So the plan you have in front of you tonight really grew out of your feedback from 2 meetings ago of can we grow east. So this does look, at least plan east as you're looking at it, the right side of the building. The classrooms in white would be the daycare, the classrooms in yellow would be basically our pre-K, 4K and kindergarten addition, along with the gym. If you flip to the last page, or second to last page, you will see the floor plan for that. This is 2 stories, so as we got deeper into the detail, if you remember last time, one of the challenges we always had with this option was cafeteria space. Anytime, when you jump back and look at the site plan, anytime we looked at growing the cafeteria to the north, which was one of the things we considered, in order to keep the kitchen in the same place, we don't wanna move the kitchen, that comes with a big expense. We really are starting to negatively impact the playground, and so our thought was, why not just take the library to become part of the cafeteria? The current library doesn't have great natural light. We were gonna need more square footage as we bring additional grade level books in, because we're picking up a few grades when we do this expansion. So in this scenario, it seemed to make sense to take the current library as part of the cafeteria, and then we will build the library on the second floor of the addition. So you'll see 2 stairs in the floor plan, and you'll see an X located next to mechanical and storage in the PTOT room. That is the elevator. Thank you, April. So now you can see here 2 stairs, and the X would be the elevator that would pop you up to a second floor. And so the last page of your handout would have the library and a couple of classrooms above. We did have other scenarios we looked at of splitting this with just the daycare one direction, addition to the back, et cetera, and when we went through those options with the leadership team, this really, and I think internally, we gravitated to this option too. It just does seem to make the most sense in terms of site-wise. It takes advantage of keeping the playgrounds where they are, being able to expand playground space, as you can see in the site plan behind the addition, expand the drop-off pickup loop with some more parking in front of the school, create convenient drop-off pickup for daycare if it goes. In this plan, I will say, if we don't do the daycare, and you say, it's just not in the cards, we'd likely will relook at the plan. We're not gonna probably have just a hole in the front corner of the plan. We obviously haven't redone that yet, but we'll re-envision the plan if daycare goes or doesn't go. But our thought is it really is in the right place if you want to do daycare, to have that located as close to the front as possible, to aid in that drop-off pickup sequence. And so those really are the 3 options that are left, and then there was an intermediate school plan, a middle school plan included as well, that we went through and really worked with the team on what renovations are needed, so you can see those shown as well. No additions here, it really is renovating a handful of spaces throughout the school to get back some of the space for educational purposes. So, any questions on those? We can obviously come back. If you have questions, happy to answer them now. Otherwise, if not, I'll turn it to Megan to talk through the budgets on those 3 options.
Alright, and you probably have the digital copy of the budget already. Oh, wow, what does this cost? Again, I'll be talking about the total project cost, and Debbie from there is here to talk about what that does to the mill rate impact. So, to start with, the summary that you're handing out, that we're handing out, coincides with those options that Matt just went through. We tried to lay it out as simplistically as possible, looking at each option, what it would look like without daycare, and then below you'll see what it looks like with daycare, or what the grand total would be if the daycare was considered. A couple things to keep in mind is that, these numbers that you're seeing today, these are total project cost numbers. So what that means is that this is for the cost of construction, materials, labor, but then also all the soft costs that are associated with it. So fees, contingency, inflation. So we are planning that if this were to go to referendum hypothetically in 2024, construction would start in 2025. That's all figured into these total project cost numbers. And then additionally, what we're budgeting here is based off of the square foot cost, based off of what Ray has designed. As Matt said, once a direction is determined as to which options the district would like to, which option or options the district would like to continue to consider, that's when we'll do a deeper dive in, and our numbers will become more defined as we continue to design. Right now, these are square foot costs based off of what we're seeing in the market. So our estimators, Dylan and Matt, who are actually connected in with us virtually, are the people that have put these numbers together. And what you're seeing here is the end result of a lot of time and detail that goes into these numbers. So I do have the detail on the back end, but for today's conversation, trying to keep it simplistic here. So option one, that would be building the new elementary school. So just explain how things are happening here. We have a cost for demoing the existing site and then restoring that site to green space. And then we have the cost of construction for building the new elementary school. Again, this is a total project cost, so it would be the furnitures, fixtures, and equipment that go into the building, the site, around the building, bringing site utilities in. So this would be, if the district were to go to referendum for a school, we're confident that if you were to go to school for a referendum for 44.95 million, you would be able to accomplish everything in option one. So then moving over to option two, that is where we stay at the existing elementary, like Matt explained. Here it's a little different because we're looking at what the cost of renovation is and the cost of new construction and what that's doing to the site. So we've actually identified each one of those. So we're looking at the cost of renovation, different than the cost of new construction. We've also isolated the cost of the site work. Nothing would be happening then at the new site, and then nothing happening at the intermediate school. Option three would be that reconfiguration going down to 3 buildings and bringing the large addition of an elementary school onto your existing intermediate school. So again, we're back to the site demolition at the elementary school, demolition at the elementary school and site restoration that's carried through. No new construction on that site, but then we're constructing a new school at the intermediate site. So there'll be a cost of renovation to the intermediate school, as well as that large addition onto the intermediate school and the auxiliary site development numbers. And then there's that renovation that Matt had talked about that would be happening in the middle school to accommodate 5th grade. So across the board, to address the elementary facility solutions, for option one, option two, and option three, we range here 44.95 to 35.96. Now, we looked at isolating daycare on its own. We wanted to see what would that do to the what would the cost be to each one of those. So, and each one of these scenarios, the daycare addition would be an additional $4.5 million to the elementary facility solution. So if you were to build a new elementary school and add daycare there, you would look at 49.45. And then that one follows across with option two and option three. So that was a quick synopsis. I know this is the same layout that you've seen before. So most board members have seen the layout of this before. But do you have questions on how this is laid out or questions on the numbers right now? Or we can go through the tax impact and what that would do potentially to the mill rate, and we can circle back on that.
I've got a question, so maybe we can get a quick status, right? So, Matt, when you were talking, I wrote down a question on the elementary school, I'll say option two. Okay. And then if you share the numbers, my question is infrastructure. So we've had Andrew here before, and we've talked about it, but there's underground, there's in-building infrastructure. Does this option address that infrastructure?
It does. So any area that is renovated on the building would basically be like new school. So you think about, it would be a whole new HVAC system, a whole new electrical system. I believe roof replacement was included in the budget, new windows, new exterior doors, masonry repair, tuck pointing. So it really would be like a new building. Not every space, we're not gonna move walls in every room. Obviously the gym's the gym, right? We're not gonna move a bunch of walls around in the gym, but the gym will have new lighting, new coat of paint, new HVAC system, new roof, etc. So it really will, to create apples to apples, it's a like new elementary school if you go that route.
That all makes sense, but I still have a question. There's underground infrastructure, water lines that are, who knows how old, other lines, gas and all that are buried too. That's still a risk then if we're not gonna do anything underground.
We'll do everything. Sometimes sanitary we won't do if we camera it and it's in good shape. The budgets assume that that's all being done. So we'll camera the sanitary lines and determine if they're in good enough condition to keep, we'll decide as a group to keep them. We're not gonna tear up concrete just to grab a pipe that's good and put a good pipe back in its place. But all of the other stuff, all new water supply would be brought in, new water service to the school, new water piping throughout, it would all be above, new gas service, new gas piping to all the equipment.
Option 2, with or without daycare, you know where I'm going with this, it shows traffic coming from the backside. Did we evaluate that more?
It was one way was always the plan with that. It's wide enough for one way, it's not wide enough to leave and return.
I'm just not confident that we could do, I guess, it says drop off pickup, is that envisioning buses or is that envisioning?
That was buses to the back of the site.
So buses would come up this residential area.
We can go either direction whether you want, we had them coming from, let's just call it the front of the school and departing the back, so that the door would be on the correct side for kids to get out and enter the school. We could do it the other way around too, we could bring them in, turn them around, but it really, we only have one width for one bus coming through, or one vehicle coming through, from Ninth. It's not wide enough to have two-way traffic at that location, unless you require land, of course.
I thought we said something, concerns about the residential area there, but I could be making that.
The reason we would recommend buses just because you can control them, right? It's a limited number, you could gate that back entrance and your buses just have remotes to open a gate for themselves to come and go. So it's an option and it's probably the most expensive scenario in terms of that length of roadway. So the budget is kind of assuming a worst case scenario from the perspective of site development. If you wanted, we did explore in past options as well, simply coming off of, again, 10th front of school, is 10th, is that right?
Yep.
Coming off 10th, simply looping in the back and then returning to 10th, on the east side with buses, that's an option as well.
I think, we'd have to have strong consideration if we use Ninth for anything with buses. I think we'd want them to enter from Ninth, because then they're on the far side of the road to make the turn in. But if we're gonna have them exit on Ninth, that's a very sharp turn and
Sure.
a traffic issue.
Sure. Okay. Yep, as long as it's one way, I think we can go either direction there, that's achievable. Great feedback.
I'm just not confident in buses there.
Yeah, it will.
The GIS mapping from the county shows enough width there. Like I said, it's not generous, it's not like
No.
we've got 100 feet where we can run a 2-lane road and have a sidewalk next to it and all that, but if we end up with this option and we have a goal as a group to separate the bus and parent traffic as best we can, given that we only really have one roadway, plus that small intersection at 9, our thought is we try to do something off of 9 with buses.
Do we have a lot of kids that walk home that way? Would that be
There's some of that
something,
consideration.
yeah?
But there is this other path, you can kind of see it on here.
The other thing a lot of districts would do is basically sometimes keep the walkers till the buses are
Right.
gone, right? So buses leave and then walkers leave a minute later, right, or
Keep the
something
kids
like
home.
that, just as a way to
Yeah.
separate that traffic.
There's even high school kids that end up over there, but if you guys are out earlier, then it's usually on weekly.
On the third option?
Yes.
Says additional playground equipment for fifth grade. 2 questions. One, how does that impact the budget, or is that figured in there? And 2, where would it go?
It is in the budget, we didn't nail
In the
down an
budget.
exact location, but we wanted you to know that we have assumed playground equipment for 5th graders.
Is there
Likely will be
room?
behind, I would say yes, we will find room. We're not talking an expansive playground for 6th grade levels, right? We're talking a playground for 1 grade level, so we will find a location that works.
Okay. And greenhouse?
Where do you figure some of these that are down in the pool edition, like our tech and all of that, where do they go in the district? With this option, or?
So right now, in the middle school, we've kind of shown your former office kind of taken over as a classroom, right? Tech is not labeled tech anymore.
And then
I think that becomes a class size conversation too. We're predicting 6 sections in all of the middle school in this plan, and that may not be the case as the years progress as well. So that's an important factor to take into consideration. What we didn't plan hardcore for the middle school we need to know if that's a direction we're going before you actually, because when you look, like, there's some hex teachers that are half-time people that have a classroom, so if we have to do some things, we would do those things. But we did not draw any kind of, this was a, let's see what we would have to do for construction if everything were exactly the same as it is today.
Great questions. Any others regarding plans or budgets?
It doesn't seem like many special ed classrooms on this middle school one, but that's,
Yeah, again, based on board feedback and administrative team feedback, we have worked a couple times back and forth now on all of these options to make sure that our special ed, our quantities are covered.
I will say with the second floor addition to the intermediate school, thank you for listening to our concerns about putting the smallest kids up and all of that. I think coming to the library consensus was a good consensus to come to. If we're looking at going up and saving space out, I think that makes sense, so thanks for that, because I think you heard exactly what our concerns were, because kindergarten kids and steps don't mix.
It would be a fantastic library too, when you think about, yes, there's a roof below, but you got a beautiful view off to the distance, and all of that can be glass along the top side, so it's got the potential to be a very nice space. Did we, I know we were back and forth, did we end up including in the budget the ability to potentially expand vertically?
We did not at this time.
That
We
would be a
discussed
question
it.
for the board to consider, is would you want to add foundations and roof structure where the two say addition roof right now? That if the district ever got in a position where you needed more room here, would you want to be able to add over the top of those roofs?
What does it cost?
We can bring a budget back, we did not include it right
Just
now.
approximate.
Matt, we actually did look at it, it was about $600,000. The reason we did not end up including it is collectively, our experience is that those projects are well planned at the beginning, things change over time. By the time you get to doing that addition, maybe 25% of the time it actually works out, based on programming and how you use the space in the future.
Yeah, it's just a scenario to consider, once we added the elevator, we weren't sure if you wanted to go that route. And I agree with Andrew, we do it on occasion, but we rarely come back and actually add the square footage in the future.
Other questions? Thoughts?
Well, we'll turn it to Debbie, and we can surely come back and we gotta get to the fun stuff, right?
can we go back to the numbers from last time?
I wish we could go back to the numbers from last
Round one.
I think we all like that.
It is what it is.
Good evening. I haven't been here yet in this process. I know I've been with you before, but I'm Debbie Brunette and I'm here with Baird. And our team gets to help run the tax impacts of scenarios that you see tonight and then others as we go. So just a reminder, I have some foundational slides and then we'll dive right in. I over-prepared some slides in case they were talking points, but when we go to referendum for schools, there are two different types of referendums we can go for. One is for operations, and that you have an operational referendum right now. That's the ability to levy more for operations for running the school. This referendum we're talking about is for the capital side. So if you did go forward with referendum, you'd be asking for the ability to levy more in order to repay debt that is tied to the buildings that we're talking through. So you have done this before. You've issued debt in the past for various projects throughout the building and throughout the district in order to have what you have today. And you're not unique. We've pulled data, this is statewide data trends for just the capital referendums as we're talking about tonight. 5-year chunks like pre-pandemic, in the pandemic, post-pandemic. But the answer is that many districts are looking to enhance and maintain the facilities that taxpayers have already invested in and meet the needs of the children of our future. And so for tonight, coming to our specific scenarios, the team asked if we would run these options through to get to the estimated tax impact for each. So how you can look at this, we have option 1, option 2, and option 3, as you just saw in your booklet. And then we isolated the daycare separately, and I'll show you how we can add that on to see. But this is the estimated impact over what the levy is anticipated to be this year. So the board won't actually certify the levy for another week or so. The final number comes out on Friday. But based on the preliminary projections, and then if we layer the debt around, and I'll talk about the assumptions in a moment, the estimated impact of option one would be $1.64 per thousand over what is currently being levied for debt. And how we translate that, if you had a $100,000 home based on equalized value, it would be an increase over what you're currently paying for debt of $164. And we have property value of 200 or 300,000, just to show the example. If it's more than that, you can multiply for your specific equalized value. Option two is a little less expensive. You can see because those dollar amounts are so close together, so is the impact. It would be $1.63 per thousand. Option three is the least expensive option, so the impact comes in the least of those three at $1.22 per thousand. And then the daycare, if we isolate it, is 32 cents per thousand. And how we would interpret that as in a project as a whole is if you went with option one and you wanted the daycare, we would add the two together and it would be $1.96. And we won't ask the community to do that math. We would get direction from you before we ask for input. But that is how the numbers break out, and that daycare then can be added to any of the options if you choose to go in that direction. So let me talk a little bit about how this financing plan is coming together, and then I'll talk a little bit about how these numbers differ from last fall when you were talking about similar projects and concepts. So this is a detailed financing plan. You don't need to master the ins and outs, but we do want you to see some of the assumptions that we have flowing into it and how we get to the impact that we do. So first we start with your existing debt service. So you levy on an annual basis about $1 million to repay the debt on the other facilities that have been passed through past referendums. When we structure this so that we can minimize the impact, we pay a little during the time of, while this is still outstanding, on the new issues, and then we fill in the gap when this new one is paid off. So you can see the smaller principal payments in the beginning, and then they get larger at the end as your old one falls off. So we have our existing, this is the sample option number one. I'm not going to walk through all three, this is more just helping you know how we calculate it. And then we get to a combined old plus new. When we compare, we're comparing your mill rate for debt this year compared to what is estimated to be going forward. Now the assumptions we've used in this is a 5.5% interest rate. So for those of you in the home market, you'll know that the interest rate you would get if you were borrowing for like a home project is much higher than that right now. We're in municipal bonds, and so right now we're issuing in 4.5%-ish. So this is assuming a slightly higher interest rate in case interest rates should continue to increase. We always like when we come back and say it's better than we thought. So we're using a 5.5% planning rate. We continue to monitor that and can adjust if things should continue to increase drastically, but just know that there is a cushion built in. We are assuming 2% property value growth going forward. So we know in the last couple of years it's been much higher than that, but to be conservative, we're using 2%. Should it come in higher, it would make these estimates look better. And then one of the biggest factors, and I'm going to talk about why these numbers look different than last time, is we're assuming the baseline is 69 cents per thousand for this year's levy. So last year you were able to levy and prepay, or for the ability to prepay, just like you prepay on your mortgage. And you were able to do that and still see a decrease in your mill rate. This year, and I'll show this on the next slide, the expectation is that you'll only be able to levy what's scheduled. So this really showing a difference in levy from 1 million up to approximately 3.7 million, and then as it levels out and carries forward. And so that's how we get to that impact, that estimated impact. So variables are property value growth, interest rates, size of project impacts it, and then our comparison to this year. So some of you, any questions so far? Can I explain that differently or better? So some of you were here last year, and our impacts were lower when we were analyzing projects of a similar cost. So I just wanted to take a moment to explain why and how that is. And tell me to fast forward if this is too much. But this is your actual mill rate. In 21-22, you had your operating, and your Fund 80 is a small sliver, that's your community service levy. And then we have Fund 39, what was scheduled, and then what was extra. So these are the dollars levied so that you'd have the option to prepay and save interest costs. The idea is that this would become the new normal. And so when we're looking at referendum, it would be a great opportunity then to address those projects and reallocate those dollars from your old loan to your new. What's happening this year is you may have heard that the state provided additional operational funds for districts impacting the levy. So that positioned you very well this year to bring on that new operational levy, but it's taking away from what we thought you'd be levying for debt. So now, instead of us comparing this box to this box, we're now comparing just the smaller one, and it's adding on. So great positioning of the district to absorb the change that came from the state. But it is resulting in the referendum projections appearing higher than they did last year, even though the assumptions are the same, total project, like total issuance cost being similar. So I just wanted to highlight that right away because it jumped out to me right away and caused me to go back, and I thought it might cause you to go back as well. There we go. So just a few last, I went too far.
This was giving me problems earlier.
It was giving you problems too? Okay.
This is your big squiggly chart, right?
Yeah, it is a big squiggly chart. Okay, so we'll skip over if the big squiggly chart would have come through, it's just showing you that although we've heard in the market that interest rates have risen, the municipal market has been somewhat sheltered, not completely, but just showing you that it's still a good interest rate environment issue. We aren't at our pandemic lows, but we're still below where we were 30 years ago. So just that, answering that question of, are we still in an environment where issuing that is okay from an interest rate standpoint? Other questions we get is, do we have the capacity to borrow? Some know, or might be new to know that school districts are limited in what they can borrow according to statutes. As a K-12 school district, you can borrow up to 10% of your TID-in equalized value. So your remaining debt capacity as of the end of this year is $151 million. So you are well within the capacity available. I'm sure Matt could design a $151 million.
I don't think you want to see the mill rate.
But we will not look at the projections. Yeah. And then I know you've talked about this before, you have these targets, but just always a reminder of our upcoming election dates. So 2024 is the target. We do have one in February, which you'd have to have approved by December, right around the corner. Spring, the board resolution would be in January, where it's approved and certified to the municipalities. And no more than 2 questions per calendar year. We always like to fit that in. That was new some time ago, but just always a good reminder as we move forward. Fall elections as well, only fall elections. So are there any questions on the financing, the numbers, the assumptions that we use?
Go back to the slide that shows totally up and
Okay.
So the change in the teal box, does
Yes.
that mean, and I already know this answer, so I'm just throwing it out there because I know I will be asked that that the district is spending more?
This right here,
On the second school? Where'd it go there?
this one?
Yep.
This one was the district levying,
The
so they
additional.
levying additional, and this can only go for debt.
Yep.
And the prepayment, or repayment of debt,
So what happened to it here?
that it went away.
Yep.
So, ideally, you could continue this forward, but if it did, because the state provided operational funds in the form of, for you to levy, so you're essentially trading.
So talk about that more.
Yeah, so the state, via the biennial budget, they provided an increase for districts who had low revenue per member, maximal revenue per member on the revenue limit. And Jan, interrupt if you want to dive into this. But you are a district that has a low per pupil amount on the revenue limit. And for you and many others throughout the state, they said, we recognize you're low, we're going to try to get you up. So they, instead of the minimum being 10,000, the minimum is now 11,000. So they said, you can increase, but we're not necessarily going to give you the aid to offset it. So for you, much of it is falling to the levy. So the good news is that because you had last year positioned yourself to prepay debt, you have the choice this year to not do that anymore and instead levy for operations, and it keeps your overall mill rate steadier than many other districts who weren't doing that, and they're seeing their total bar go up.
We have a lot of clients that are having that problem where they're saying,
Yes.
we got more state aid, right? That's the headline, the state's giving more, but in reality, it's local taxpayer dollars, and so they're actually increasing taxes at the local level, which is confusing to a
Which
lot of
that's the key
taxpayers.
point that
So-
exactly I wanted you to explain was, I mean, it looks like, oh, well, that red line moved up, so they're obviously spending more, and that's, we are, because the state told us to, but the state is also saying, here you go, but you have to tax your local municipality.
Yes.
They didn't just say, here it is in a check that doesn't have any reports, right? So,
It's a positive, right? I mean,
It is
you're getting to
it is.
increase your operating budget,
Yep.
the gray bar is getting larger without increasing the mill rate to your local taxpayers across the board.
right, and it's a kudos to the past few years, that it was well thought out and well executed, that we're not jumping up or falling down, and we're staying stable.
Yes, you were well positioned to absorb that, what then was an unknown.
Can you go back to the slide? I'm assuming we'll get these slides, this information, because we don't have it in front of us. Not that one, I want the debt schedule.
Sorry,
You gotta click.
I'm getting a little click happy, trying to get there.
So you have that one payment of 640 in 24, 25, and then you don't have any principal payments again until 31, 32. What would happen if you really averaged out those debt payments throughout the years, because we would certainly be paying less in interest?
Yes,
I guess I would like to see that scenario where the debt payments are consistent and not like in 24, 25, and I don't know why you would have done it just that 1 year and then dropped that.
yeah, so good clarification. So I talked about how we call this wrapping the debt around. So there are several different concepts, and I'll try to do them in the right order. But school districts in Wisconsin can borrow up to 20 years, so each issue. And so if we did one issue for 20 years, it would have been a larger impact. So us splitting it into two issues, one in 1 year, one in the next, allows us to do 21 years while still fitting into that requirement. So all of this is trying to get the impact low. And then we only moved 10 million over because the goal then is to also reduce interest costs. So you're absolutely right in that if we did just plain level debt service, as we call it, we take the 34.95 million and we just divide it evenly over these. You're right that the interest costs would be reduced over the life of the project, but this impact would be much higher because we would be paying this would all get moved up here, so instead of going from 1 million to 3.7 or 3.8, we would be going, we'd be adding $1 million to that. And so now your impact, instead of being $1.64, it might be, and I'm just $2.64. And so we can run the scenario, but this is going to be higher.
Right, I mean, cause the way it is now, it's like you have us paying 34 million for interest over the life of those bonds.
Correct.
That's just insane.
That does assume, Jan, that the future boards wouldn't decide to defease debt as well. So as you have done as a board a couple of times, right, with a 2% parameter for equalized value increase, if you keep on the trend of 10, 15, 18, not that you will, but even if you're, 5 and 6 and 7%, future boards would have the ability to defease debt and really kind of pay down that 34 million in interest expense as well, while keeping the initial impact for taxpayers a little bit lower. So that's another reason I think many districts consider this strategy, and they manage that interest expense moving forward with equalized value increases versus managing it from the outset of the bond issuance and having such a large increase in taxes. Not saying it's right, that's just a strategy that is used almost universally across the state in managing capital projects.
So in reality, when you look at that, a new building just isn't the 44 or whatever. It's the 44 plus the 34 that they have to pay in interest to build that building. That's really the true cost of a new building.
Yeah, unless you have the debt capacity, you
hypothetical,
wanted to
Yeah,
borrow, just, go to the taxpayers and tax them $49 million in 1 year. I've never had that happen in 30 years doing this,
I don't
but
think,
that's the only way you
Yeah.
avoid having interest expenses.
yep, and it's just like saying when you go to buy your home, if your home is listed at 200,000, you're paying interest on that, and you don't talk about how you bought your house for the double that it ends up being after the interest cost, although you know it's there. We talk about the amount of principal that you need to borrow. But yes, we can run this at level debt service and show what the different tax impact would be. It would be sizably higher than this. And if interest rates came in better, we do this often. Let's say that the market steadies and if you do choose to go to referendum, the referendum passes, and it comes to issue, and interest rates are lower than the 5.5%, and we're able to push it all up or move some up, we of course do that. The goal is to get that interest as low as possible while managing the impact to your local taxpayers.
What is the interest rate right now on municipal bonds that are issuing?
Around 4.5% is common right now.
You can always refinance it too in the future, right?
Yeah.
So when we get back to 3s or 2.8s, Debbie will be busy running around the state refinancing everybody's debt from this time to get
Yes.
to those lower rates,
Yeah.
so.
And we actually do watch that for districts, for those opportunities so that they can take advantage and lock in a lower interest rate when possible.
So just as a reminder to the board, not that we can't keep going and having conversations, the goal is to get this information in front of you. Next steps are our community listening sessions are coming up in November, so that postcard is hit, correct? Is a new record in terms of how fast it went from printer to mailbox. So that was really positive. We have the community feedback form, which is live, but it's missing a few pieces of data, correct, Becky? So we wanted you to see this information tonight, so the estimated costs and tax impacts will now be added to the website, so that will be available for people that are providing feedback on the community input form. And the makings of what you have here, conceptual plans, budgets, tax impact information, along with some just historical background information on the challenges at the elementary school, is gonna be the general content for our community engagement sessions coming up in November. So the goal again was, I don't believe we were gonna narrow. I think the plan was to just get all the information that's gonna go to the community in November in front of the board first. That's always been our goal, right? You as a board see it first, and decide what you want to go with. And so that is the plan right now, is to share those kind of 4 major pieces of information with the community at the listening sessions, and also collect feedback from them, with the input form, which is live. It's just missing those 2 key pieces of information, which will be added tomorrow. I should have started with that instead of ending with it, I apologize.
And there's additional promotion also going around, so every resident should have received that postcard in their mailbox. There's also a press release that's going out, there's social media. So, our goal is to drive as much community participation as possible.
And Matt also, and they have, we have some staff specific listening sessions for the elementary, intermediate staff face-to-face, and then middle and high school virtually. So they all get a chance to have input as well.
So last week of October will be available for them, and in-person and virtual options for them just to learn more and ask questions as well.
I have 2 thoughts. Neither one is gonna be very popular, so, my name's Brooke Hulzer, so I'll just start with that. So, I think we missed a golden ticket last year. It's the elephant in the room. We, our community missed a golden opportunity to get a project done and capitalize while things were good. I know I've been beating myself up over that personally. So, would like to just say that, note that one, and then say, looking forward though, the board is going to hate me for saying this, but, I can't help but think about not tearing down the elementary school with a couple of these options. Let me explain. If you look at option 3, the idea of putting that many kids in one building is very upsetting to me. That's too many kids in one building, in my opinion. I think that, we recognize that we need to have multiple administrators and multiple guidance counselors, and I see all that. But as I think through that page where I can see the student numbers listed, it still feels like way too many. And so if you go to pull some of that off, we have this elementary school down there that has some newer features and a gym and a cafeteria that we could easily look at refiguring and staying at 4 buildings, but maybe that has our daycare and our kids club or something like that. And I was a fan of the 5 building system for that very reason, which was not popular at all, and I knew that. But now as we look at this option 3, that is, does impact a lot of that intermediate school, that would be a feasible way to offset some of those students going there. But don't hit me for bringing something back out.
In that scenario, would 4K be there as well, or would you want 4K with 5K?
I felt very strongly that I like the idea of 4K having specials and being up there, but I think if this option's seriously on the table, my opinion would be that 4K probably goes back. But that's just my opinion, and I know that's also not the most popular. I know what I've heard from a lot of parents in the district is that daycare is a need, and seeing that price tag associated with it is upsetting, because it's a building, just the building space is that much, we're never gonna recoup that back. And so, if I was a business owner, right, and I was going to look to build a building, and it was costing me 4.5 million, I'm gonna look at maybe renting a space or doing, another space. And so my brain started thinking, as I'm watching these, going, well, there's gotta be something else that is gonna be fiscally responsible and yet still meet the needs of our public. So neither one of those sentiments is the popular answers tonight, so. And I also understand we're on a time frame, right? We wanna try to get these narrowed down so that we can potentially take action, and I apologize, but.
That's not that significant, Brooke. If that's something the board wants explored, that's.
And I'm only one of 5, so, I certainly don't do it on just my wish, but.
It's a sub-version of one of the 8 options we've explored over the last 3-4 years together, so I think we can get there pretty quickly if that's the desire of the board.
I think a pertinent component that we should consider sharing information with the public is, wasn't that many years ago, our mill rate was 11, 12. And now we're talking about a new building and facility for 8 point something, right?
I have to
So
ask.
I think it would be beneficial to show what we have had in the past with our mill rates, what we'd be proposing here. We're very fortunate that our mill rate is extremely low.
I was anticipating this, so I had it tucked in the back just in case. Try to be ready.
So, you know, even at that, if you add on the 1.64, I'm not saying that that's a great thing, right? I mean, we gotta watch people's pocketbooks and everybody wants to save their money, right? But if you have this in line and you say another $1.32 or whatever it was, you're at 8 something? Well, that's not even back to 2021, you know?
So I think the suggestion would be including this in our just general, mill rate history section of the presentation.
And I'm not saying that's a selling point or anything, but I think it's information that would be beneficial to have.
Context, yeah.
But if you're gonna do this, then you have to also put out there the equalized value and how much that has changed, because that's what's changing the mill rate. You can't just like give this piece, you have to show the whole picture of what has changed to create those changes. Because, yeah, it looks great when you just see that, but what's happened in the whole picture that drove that down? You'd have to tell the whole
We've had debt
picture.
retire and we've had all that other stuff
Yeah.
too, right? So.
And that is right, so during this time, especially the last couple of years, there has been sizable equalized value growth. But there have been several years through this time frame. I'm just making sure so for instance, the first year there was a decrease of 2%. And so there have been periods of time where the growth hasn't been as significant as the last couple of years. But yes, the last couple of years there has been sizable equalized value growth.
Good feedback. Any other thoughts from board members, just in terms of what you saw tonight, or recommendations to the team on kind of what we take to the community at the listening session?
I've said this far too many times, we have to do something, right? We all know that, we've known that, and we continue to know that, so, we're going to have to take action to some level.
I'm wondering with the price tag on daycare, what are you thinking at this moment? Because we have that as a question that's on the input. And right now it's just, would you be in favor of daycare? Because we didn't have numbers to put with it. I'm wondering what y'all are feeling about
Would
that.
that be one of the 2 questions then?
No, she has it on the or in the input.
That is another way you could tackle it. You could make it a standalone referendum question if you wanted to. That would be your 2 questions for the year. It would mean you could not come back in November if we aren't successful in April, but that would be one way to do it.
I think just getting the input on it is helpful. But that's my opinion.
Any other thoughts about what, maybe I don't know if we're going back and looking at what Brooke suggested, or child in 4K at OES?
And I don't know either how much space is available if you could do kids club, daycare, and 4K. I don't feel like there's enough options to do that when you're not here, I know, so.
Kids club and daycare wouldn't be super difficult to plug in there. And we've got dollars in to demolish the whole thing, right? So
Right, so
if you reallocate some of those dollars to make some minor improvements to the number of spaces you're gonna need to for daycare.
right,
I'm not saying it's apples to apples, but, usually daycares don't have busing provided. Kids club would be the shift, right? Morning taking them off and afternoon dropping off, but I think that's far fewer numbers than we're currently dealing with there, is my guess.
it's not ideal, I recognize that, but.
Yeah.
I'm
It might be an
thinking from a
affordable way to
cost saving.
tiptoe into
Correct.
daycare and see if it works, and if it does work, and the community wants to sustain it, then maybe there's a future conversation about permanent space.
I don't think we're gonna have to keep it around 4 days.
to think though, I mean, there's the existing school demolition and site restoration at 1.4 million. If you went with option 3, and if you just cut that in half and just say 700,000 just for, then the daycare addition and associated site components, that 4.5 million is gone. But then you're gonna have to do some renovations and things down there, so if you went with the same and cut that in half, just, you know.
Yeah, we don't have any daycare compliant space right now, right? So there's gonna be
Right.
some investment
Right.
regardless of where we put it, new or remodeled, to make it daycare compliant. But I think to your point, Brooke, you avoid, $4.5 million of first cost.
And we keep a gym, and we know
That's
that
fair.
the gyms are
Yep,
rarely
that's a good
used,
point.
and that was the one thing I liked about the 5
Yep.
buildings, was not tearing down a perfectly good gym, so. That's why I'd just like to explore it. But somebody else, I need 2 other people to say yes, they'd like to entertain the idea, otherwise it's a moot point.
To me, if you're saying that the elementary school is bad, and we have to do the new construction in that, how would I feel that then you'd say it's okay for my kid, especially a young kid, a newborn or whatever, then it's not okay for K through 2, but it's okay for a newborn to 4. And it's okay for kids club. If it's bad for the other ones, then how's it okay for them?
I'm saying the sections in the 60s are not okay, right? But the 1990 section is newer than this building, so I think there's components of it that can be used. But the other part of staying versus option 2 on that site is that traffic and kid safety. That is my number 1 concern down there at that level, is traffic in and out, kids walking through, busing. I hear Matt that they think they can take the traffic going through one direction, maybe, but I still think there's a lot of usable space, and if price to price, staying on that site versus building new is the same, then that.
It would seem to me operationally, your annual savings are really gonna come from getting your, let's just say 4K through 12th graders generally consolidated to the fewest number of sites.
Right.
You have a daycare, you're gonna have a daycare director, whether that daycare director's in a building that is attached to the building with first graders in it or not, is, I think from an operating perspective, is probably not gonna affect you significantly. It is more square footage to heat and cool and maintain and insure and plow snow, there's no doubt. But it's also not $4.5 million. So if daycare is a consideration, might be an interesting avenue to explore.
Just when I look at option 1 and option 2, I just immediately rule out option 2 because it's on the same site. Like you're saying with the transportation issue, if it's basically almost the same exact price, to me, option 1 makes more sense to explore than option 2. I just feel like, just for me, option 2 is a waste of my time looking at when we can move it. If you're for basically the same price, have way better traffic stuff, they're all closer together.
No, I agree.
Unless there's something in this that we need to excuse.
So if you put the daycare on any of these buildings, what would happen if our enrollment grew and we needed that space? What are you gonna do with the day? Are you gonna take over those daycare, or what are you gonna do?
It would depend on the amount of growth, I think. If it's a classroom or 2, we've got flex classrooms built into these programs generally. As we've talked with bubble classrooms, right, when you happen to have 6th or 7th section, because you just have a lot of first graders or whatever it is. So we've got some of that built in, so off the top of my head, we probably have to grow, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, 20 to 30 kids per grade level before we would probably start to get to the point where we would even consider taking daycare space.
Right, and it would depend on where it is again, because, we're not gonna
Yeah.
move daycare for a high school grade. when you have a bunch of freshmen, so. Right.
I hope we're talking about that someday, right? That means your operating budget's in a great place and
Oh.
from the growth perspective with enrollment, right? I mean, it's gonna be a real positive from the operating budget perspective.
I'd love to have that.
And that frees up flexibility usually too, and we can plan these buildings too, regardless of where they go, if the board eventually says, you know, just, where would 2 more classrooms go in the future, or where would 4 more classrooms go in the future? We can plan those, make sure we don't put utilities under them, right, just make them grass for now, so, Jane, we could easily accommodate some of those considerations once we land on which direction we're leaning towards.
This is a lot to take in, so I'm not exactly sure how I feel about some of it. And with Corey, like if you're looking between 1 and 2, I just don't even see why look at 2. I'm really, it's hard for me to look at 3 with that many kids. So I hadn't thought of, you know, what you're suggesting, but
Yeah.
I'm not there.
I think with option 3, I don't think we want to go right out with the bathwater, so to speak, because, yeah, it's a number of kids, but it's not that anybody else hasn't been through this or can't deal with it, right? We can figure that out.
Yeah. What I like with like 1 or 3 is being able to ask a separate question of daycare or not. You educate the public on the needs or whatever. Let them decide that that's not necessarily dependent on, if you're looking at doing a 4 or whatever, if you kept the elementary, that would be only if we did the daycare. But if the public doesn't want the daycare, like, then we're kind of ruled out for both. You know what I mean?
I think we have to decide after the listening sessions and the input whether we can or not. I don't know that we ask at election, because that would take up both of the questions. And then if it doesn't pass, you've got a long time to wait until you're back to asking again, which pushes you back a whole other year, so I wouldn't be in favor of that. I think we have to plan in the next month or so that we're just gonna have our listening ears open and we're gonna listen to all this input from our community via the input meetings and the online, input form and all of the things, and listen and then come to a consensus with admin team and what we've heard in the public. And then formulate going forward from there. That's how I take it. Because if we go to referendum in April and it doesn't pass, then we've done something wrong and our community is saying no. And then we need to reformulate because we have to do something down there. And so if you ask one question with daycare, one question without, and I don't know, or you ask one for a building and then with the daycare option as its own separate, you just tied your hands for another 365 days. But that's just me.
Yeah, and we are looking for direction tonight, remember, so just thoughts are great. We do have all those forums that are coming up and opportunities for people to provide feedback. Obviously, you need time to digest all this as a board. But to your point, I mean, eventually we'll be back in late November, early December, having conversations about, you know, what is the option you as a board are thinking about taking forward.
Well, you know, with that in mind, you know, I'm gonna agree with Corey to the point that option 1, option 2, let's not waste our time with 2, because you've got old still down there, right? And there won't be any issues about traffic patterns or safety or anything, so. 2 to me goes away.
I hear that, but the only thing I think about is when we did our school perception survey last year, there was a large group of people that felt like having a school in the community versus way out there was a better option. So I hear that, and dollars and cents wise, I think that makes the most sense. Was it a great number?
I believe it was, but, and I think staff said the same, and
It was, there was a bigger price tag difference between them, which
And
I
there was,
think drove,
right, so that
which
may
I
have
think
skewed that,
drove some
absolutely.
of that.
Yes, absolutely, good point.
I mean, if you're looking at fiscal responsibility between one and two.
If you have more thoughts coming out of tonight, please share them with Becky, and we talk weekly now, right, basically, and so we'll continue that, that's a good thing, we're just making sure we're moving, all pulling in the same direction towards the engagement sessions, so if you have more thoughts as you get some more time with this, please just reach out and we'll be ready to address them when we're back together.
Questions for Debbie? I'm just asking if anybody has any other additional financial aspect questions.
Do you have any thoughts?
Oh, I think it's a great discussion. It would be super interesting to see what the community gives us as feedback here. That's what I'm super interested in.
Me too.
Jane got a poster?
But it's also feedback, it's not,
Statistically, we're not going to analyze it. It's feedback for y'all to look at.
right.
We have to update the survey a little bit, or survey, input form a little bit based on the numbers, because they're not there right now. And we've actually had some people take it without the numbers, which is pretty awesome, that people actually got a postcard and scanned it and did the surveys.
Excellent, thank you. And then Debbie's slides are gonna get shared out, as Dan requested, right? So those will get shared with the board and you can study the debt schedule. All
Can't
those
wait.
numbers.
That's why we usually share
I go to the same
after.
place, Jason, don't worry. I'll
Yeah.
do that too.
And we will run the level debt service, so you have that information, we'll share it with you. Becky and then
I'm just trying to think of different ways to lessen the interest cost. Because to think that interest would be that high, so it ends up being $86 million.
That's why I don't do that math on my house.
Right.
I was gonna say, just make that.
Or the car.
Yes, or the
Or the
car,
car.
let's not do that.
Yeah, I
I
mean, the
really-
inverse argument
I
is
get
for
it,
the
but-
person that only lives here for 10 years, right, and then moves somewhere else. They're gonna say, I don't care, right?
Well,
Stretch
they
it
don't-
out,
yeah.
and let those people that move in here in year 11 through 21 that are now taking advantage of the schools, let them pay for it too. So that, obviously, that's, the balancing act has gotta be somewhere in the middle, but.
I am curious to know administration's thoughts, on how moving some of these grades together impacts our students academically, socially. I'd be really curious to hear on some of that.
We had those advantages, disadvantages that we did last time. If you
Exactly.
remember, right, we can pull some of those back out and obviously validate them again with the leadership team.
Yeah. I just,
Right, well, if there's no other further questions, it's 6:08, we will adjourn until our regular meeting at 6:30.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.